Hello, everybody. We're going to get started in just a second once everyone gets their audio connected. Okay, so welcome everybody. First of all, thank you so much for joining us today for Your Self-Care and Psychological First Aid in Your Care for Others During COVID. We have two special guest speakers with us, Rose Olmsted and Carson Gardner today from the Anishinaabe Nation. And so I just need to go through a few housekeeping things before we get started, and then you're in for a great training today. So again, I'm Megan Dotson, and I'm the program manager for the National American Indian and Alaska Native MHTTC. And we are actually part of a big network of regional centers, and we have a national coordinating office, which you can see on the screen here where we're located. And we are in the middle of Iowa, in the southern region, so Iowa City. So this program is actually sponsored by SAMHSA, and so the National American Indian and Alaska Native Mental Health Technology Transfer Center is supported by a grant from SAMHSA, and so the content of the event is the creation of the presenters, and the opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of SAMHSA, HHS, or the American Indian and Alaska Native MHTTC. So following today's training, we will have links to the presentation and slides. Recording will be available on our YouTube channel. We have information about how to request and receive CEUs or a certificate of attendance if applicable. And then we will supply our GIPRA survey for feedback at the end of today's training. So you'll be able to fill that out, give us your opinion on today's session. We also like to take the time to reflect on the land. So we have a land acknowledgement here that I'd like everyone to read for just a moment. It is created by Ella and Keely Driscoll and Sean Bear of the Meskwaki Nation, who are part of our staff. So please take a moment. Okay, and so this will be available in the handouts. So if you'd like to reread it, please do so at your leisure. Thank you. Today's speakers. So I have the pleasure of meeting these two last month, and we've been working together for a couple months now. And Rose Olmsted, she is a disaster mental health instructor, volunteer instructor, mind you, and she's worked for 38 years as a social worker, supervisor, and coordinator of crime victim services, and coordinator of a Nova crisis response team in Minnesota. So since 1989, Rose has been a mental health corps volunteer on the Southeast Minnesota Emergency Medical Services CISM team, and she's been a Red Cross volunteer as a disaster mental health team member and instructor since 2009. So June of 2020, Rose has been volunteering as an instructor for the Red Cross Virtual Family Assistance Center, and they provide individual and group support for frontline workers during COVID, facilitating groups for employees and supervisors, and instructing psychological first aid during COVID classes. So as a mental health volunteer, she takes call shifts for the RCV FAC, taking calls from individuals whose loved ones have passed due to COVID as part of a multidisciplinary call center. And starting in 2021, Rose has been doing outreach to American Indian communities and those who serve them to offer individual and group support, as well as instructional classes like you will see today. So our other speaker is Dr. Carson Gardner, and he is an Anishinaabe, and I knew I'd say it wrong, Anishinaabe elder, Bear Clan, and old family doctor, a poet, a pipestone carver, and Adiuzukananini, a sacred storyteller. He has spent the past quarter century living, working, praying, and learning with his Eagle Clan wife, Gail, of 48 years on I cannot say it. I apologize. It's not my native language. I'm just trying really hard to get it right. Land of abundant white clay, the White Earth Ojibwe Reservation in northern Minnesota. Try it again. Gawa Boba Ganganag. I did it wrong, but his heart is his, this is his true home. So with that, I will stop talking and we can get on with today's wonderful training. So we would like to open up in a nice, a good way. And so Dr. Gardner is going to do a blessing and a smudge. So I will stop sharing my screen and we can do that. Thanks, guys.
Ogechibani du Ishko de Nini Indigena Kaz Makade Makwa Nin Dodem Gawa Babi Gani Kag Ishkoni Ganin Dunchiba Minogijigan Ichimani du Minomani du Guabanong Mani du Jawanong Mani du Ningabi Anong Mani du Kiwadnong Mani du Akinuku Muskijig Mashumas and Nishanabeg Mashumas Ananig Minawana Kumasananig Gakini Indunaway Maganag Debwewan Nibwakawan Zonga de Ewan Zagi Iriwan Manaji Iriwan Guayakwa Diziwan Deba Den Dizawan Minobamadziwan Minowijindiwan Joenjigawan Ahau Miu Migwech Wopila Makawakan Sacred Earth, we have lost our way. Once we knew you as mother, now we wander in darkness, lost and empty. Help us to find our way back to you, grandmother. You are the ground that feeds us, the soil that heals us, the land that binds us together as one people. Teach us once more to walk upon this earth in a sacred manner and to find once again the sacred balance. Aho, Heto Wakan, sacred fire, your ancient power lives within us all. You are the giver of light, the source of warmth, and the messenger of transformation. Long ago, we sat beside you as relatives. We have forgotten who we are. Help us to remember. Show us the way back to your gentle flames of respect, honor, and humility. You Liwa Khan, sacred water. You are the rivers that flow on this earth and in our veins, the rain that pours down from Father's sky, and the mighty oceans that swell with deep mysteries. We cannot live without you. Speak to us once more that we may hear the voice of ancestral knowledge and return to our place in the sacred circle. Aho, Ta'ata Ewa Khan, sacred wind. You are like the great mystery, moving in all places, in all people, in all things. You cannot be seen, yet we feel your presence and see your power in the dancing prairie grass and the flight of the eagle. Whisper to our spirits, help us to find wisdom once again. We are made of earth, fire, water, wind. We share one earth, one sun, and one moon. Let us live together as one people. Help us, great mystery, to mend the sacred hoop, to heal our brokenness, and to find once more our place in the web of life. Ho. Bonjour, bonjour. I'm Carson Gardner. I'm going to share my screen here, and then I am going to do an introduction before my colleague, my wonderful colleague, Rose, speaks. So I hope you can all see that. I need confirmation. Megan, Parker, can you see this, my slides okay?
Nope, not yet.
Okay, well, we'll give it another try.
I think we will all disappear on Zoom when you share your screen. There you go.
Okay, you can see the slides.
Yep.
All right, good. I've called my introduction COVID Cultural First Aid. I'm the medical director of the Gawa Babi Ganikag Anishinaabe Ojibwe Nation Tribal Health Department and Ambulance Service. I am going to, there we go, get access. We smudged. If you attended the 1-hour seminar last month, I talked a little bit about the healing, the work of smudging. And the prayer I just shared with you is a prayer by a Lakota spiritual musician, John Two Hawks, and he deserves spiritual recognition for that beautiful prayer. And I have included it in my slides. The pictures that are included here with my introduction come from our wonderful spiritual powwows here on Gawababiganikag, the land of abundant white clay, white earth. I hope you will enjoy them. I'm sure you have good memories of spiritual blessings from your powwow celebrations. So I hope you will accept these beautiful pictures as healing medicine along with the words I offer to you. That was my introduction. I won't repeat it, but I will point out that I'm going to talk to you about cultural first aid from the perspective of our White Earth Ojibwe Nation. You will have your own cultural and spiritual first aid from your nation's teachings, and I don't mean to interfere with those or supplant them, but I will tell you what I know from what I learned here, where I live, where I pray, and where I do my part along with others to serve the people. I am a Dizukewanini, Nina Dizukewanini. It means I'm a teller of sacred stories. But also, I'm a board certified family doctor with 40 plus years. I won't tell you how much the plus is, but 40 plus years of Western medicine practice. So I sort of have one foot in each discipline of healing, and I'm fine with that. I'm not going to read in detail all these words for you, but I will say that I do support Western family practice. I'm a family doctor. I support Western family practice, birth to old age, outpatient, inpatient, obstetrics, trauma care, emergency room care, ongoing primary care. I support primary care, mental health counseling, crisis intervention, residential and outpatient chemical dependency treatment, chronic opioid pain management, including pain contracts, the absolutely crucial importance of harm reduction principles. More and more, I think that harm reduction principles are really what living life in a good way is all about. And I support Western medications. I support ambulance care. I support responsible regulation of research on Native Nation lands, and I support tribal cooperation with local, state, and national quality of care supervisory boards. And I've been a team member on our COVID response team here, and I certainly support transmission prevention protocols, COVID risk assessments, quarantine isolation, contact tracing, testing, vaccination, boosting, scientific research, public health education, answering employee and community questions, and emergency community support protocols. And I've pretty much participated as a team member in all of those things here in the last 2 years of COVID response. But here's the thing. Western medicine is pretty good at curing, but often curing by itself just doesn't last. All of us, native and non-native, need deep inner healing and return of life balance. Traditional healing is very good at that, very good at deep inner healing and helping to restore life balance. So I believe that the best healing for Native Nation people is a combination of respectful, honorable, and humble Western medicine and respectful, honorable, and humble traditional healing. My spiritual teachers here over the last quarter century have all agreed with that. And I will say that I think it's long past time for Western medicine to cooperate in that respectful, honorable, humble process. And many providers of Western medical care do cooperate in that. So my job today is not to talk to you about Western medicine. My job is to talk to you about White Earth Ojibwe traditional cultural first aid. We call ourselves Anishinaabe people or Anishinaabe. You may call us Ojibwe. Our traditional teachings tell us that one of our main purposes here is to learn how to live life in good balance through the circle dance of life, and learn how to do that in the physical, the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual parts of the medicine wheel. So, and if we stop and think about it, we all realize that our circle dance is really a spiral because it travels through time. So another traditional responsibility I have is to offer you reasons why you should even listen to me today. Why should I be able to talk to you and counsel like this? I did not grow up in a home where Anishinaabe culture and spirituality were practiced, though I have Anishinaabe blood. I'm not an enrolled member here at White Earth, but my Anishinaabe blood called me here to the White Earth Anishinaabe circle dance of culture and spirit and language. My ancestor by marriage is Shenawishkung. If you want to look him up, the Jaganashi people, the English heritage people around here, call him Chief Bemidji. You can look him up, and he is well remembered as a compassionate, kind, gentle, responsible person who helped many Anishinaabe and Jaganashi English heritage people survive in the mid and late 1800s. So I'm related to him by marriage, but that's respected in traditional Native communities. I was very fortunate in that I had one cousin who helped me get connected with my Anishinaabe heritage and stay at least somewhat connected. But it wasn't until middle age that I came here to Gawababiganikag. I was called here by the land, and this is my heart's true home. And maybe someday I'll tell you the story of the Heron's visit, but I'm not going to tell it to you today. More beautiful pictures take a moment to realize the significance of a young shawl dancer and a decorated U.S. Marine, both members of the White Earth Nation. In May of 2019, just before COVID, I had a near fatal motorcycle accident. I hit the ditch at 55 miles an hour. I won't talk about my clumsiness, but I sustained a broken neck, 4 broken backbones, multiple facial skull fractures, a shoulder separation, 11 rib fractures, a collapsed bleeding left lung, a ruptured bleeding right kidney, a ruptured bleeding right adrenal gland, a concussion, post-traumatic cardiac arrhythmias. And I spent some time in an ICU as a patient, not a doctor. And I spent several months in rehab when I got home, and I spent 6 months in a neck and back brace. And I'm here talking to you today. I'm even smiling sometimes. And speaking of smiling, what do you call a poorly fitting COVID mask? Well, you call it reality. What do you call a simple, cheap, accurate, quick COVID test? You call it one that isn't actually available. Why is the United Kingdom's Prime Minister Boris Johnson so popular during COVID? Dude, because he supports a multi-party system. And finally, what is Ronald McDonald's favorite COVID medication? Monoclonal antibodies. So application of a little Anishinaabe humor that's circulating around here, that's not disrespectful. It's healing. If we can't laugh together, how can we cry together? So I hope you think one of those things is funny, because if you don't, you're not as COVID crazy as I am right now. But anyway, lying in an ICU bed, I decided that I needed to use my Anishinaabe cultural and spiritual identity to survive. But I was not in a position to do anything very sophisticated. So I used miigwech, We have a lot of teachings here, but miigwech is the first word you'll learn if you're not Ojibwe and you come here. Miigwech means thank you. And we are happy to be known as the thankful people. And pretty much the only thing I had control of in that ICU was saying thank you. So I started saying thank you to my dear wife, Gail, to the doctors and nurses, to the physical therapists and respiratory therapists, to the people who helped me to the bathroom, helped get me cleaned up, brought me my meals, cleaned my room, to friends who came and didn't know what to say, and from a distance to my beautiful puppy dogs, Jules and Georgia, and to the land, to the creatures, to the rooted ones, to the sky, to the water, to the inner fire. All I had control of was saying thank you. And I said thank you to everybody. People would just laugh when they walked into the room because they knew, even if I saw them 10 minutes ago, I was going to say thank you to them. So when I was a little better, as an amateur poet, I started writing stuff on paper. And I wrote about 100 pages that nobody's ever going to see. But you know, that worked for me, saying thank you and meaning it and writing stuff down that was in my head. It worked for me, not very sophisticated, not very complicated, not very intellectual, but it worked. It didn't work without Creator and the healing spirits. It worked because Creator and the healing spirits were there to support me at street level. So what's the point, Doc? Sometimes you have to go back to the simple things, the things you learn as a child. Don't take the simple, basic spiritual teachings of your native nation for granted. Don't take your own healing common sense for granted. They'll work to save your life right now and right where you are, right in the middle of COVID frustration and chaos. If being thankful and writing things down on paper helped me, then certainly your native nation's basic cultural and spiritual teachings and your personal use of them can save your life too. I can only talk about what I know, so I'm going to talk a little bit here about the 7 great teachings that are taught here on White Earth lands and in other Ojibwe nations. Actually, Dakota teachings are very similar, very similar. And remember that because of the story I'm going to tell you later on. So here they are in English: truth, wisdom, courage, compassionate kindness, respect, honesty, and humility. I will say them in Ojibwe Mowin: De Waegan Nibwakawan, Zonga De Ewin, Zagi Idiwin, Manaji Idiwin, Wayakwa Dizuwin, Deba Den Dizuwin. Those are the 7 great teachings. No human being is perfect and we all struggle, but those teachings are a basic foundation and guideline for living life in good balance. All of us native nations use some kind of a medicine wheel. You can see that I drew this medicine wheel myself because it's a little chubby, just like me. But despite the chubbiness, you can see that we Anishinaabe begin our circle dance in the East with beginnings and nurture, infancy and childhood, and physical needs. We continue in the South, teens and young adults, growth and experience and emotional needs. Then we circle to the West, maturity, adults, work, achievement, and skill and mental needs. And we finish the circle in the North with elders, wisdom, peace, and sharing, and spiritual needs. So this is nothing that will surprise those of you from Native nations. There was a Jaganashi guy, a Wasichu guy, a Belagana guy named Maslow, and he presented a different view called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I'm not going to emphasize it. It was good, just different than our approach. But my point is, however you organize your understanding of what it takes to live life in balance, our lives as Native Nation people are about learning and understanding and practicing and achieving balance in the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual aspects of our life. And of course, they're all braided together You can't really separate them like we do on a medicine wheel picture. Creator put us here to learn some very important lessons of balance. And I believe the teachings I've been given that Creator has something very important for us human beings to do after we finish our lives here on Earth, something in the star world. I don't know what it is, but it must be very important, considering what we have to go through here as human beings to learn about life balance. So in the middle of the COVID pandemic, our medicine wheels are all torn apart. We don't feel safe. We don't feel nurtured. We haven't been able to get together safely to learn and work and play. We've had trouble with finances and relationships and fears of illness and death. And we're restless and angry and confused and discouraged. So medicine wheel torn apart. What do we do about it? Well, I'm not going to offer you magic, but here we use the 7 great teachings as a foundation for thinking about ways that we can return to good life balance. And of course, we all know that the medicine wheel through time is really a spiral. It's not a circle. I think I first saw that mentioned by a woman named Lillian Pitawanakwat. I think she's Michigan Anishinaabe, or one of the Anishinaabe cousin nations like Cree or Potawatomi or Odawa. Anyway, our circle dance is really a spiral. So I'm just going to briefly talk about some teaching thoughts based on the 7 teachings. You'll see a story listed at the top of each one of these slides. I'm going to later tell you a story called the Chi De Waegan Story, and that can't be recorded or written down. So there's going to be a half an hour blank in this seminar, and I've agreed with Rose and Megan and Parker to tell these stories to fill in the blank. And so if you come back to this later on and look at the recording and listen to it, you'll hear these stories. Not going to tell them right now. The truth is COVID has frightened and frustrated and discouraged us all. And in fact, we human beings are the neediest creatures. We're not the top of the pyramid, so to speak. We're the neediest creatures. I heard an Anishinaabe spiritual teacher say, you know what? If human beings disappeared from the earth, there wouldn't be a hitch in the rhythm. Everything else would do fine, but just let one of the major groups of the rest of the creation, the winged ones, the four-leggeds, the swimmers, the rooted ones, just let them disappear and human beings would fall apart. So point made. We also need to realize that everything we need, all the guidance we need to live life in a good way and good balance is in our Native nations, languages, cultures, and spirituality. That does not mean we can't find them other places like Western psychological first aid. We can, but we can also find them in our own nation's teachings. And it's important that we use the best tools we have, both traditional, cultural, linguistic, spiritual, and Western medicine, to share healing with each other in this time of COVID chaos. Wisdom. Traditional ceremonies built into our DNA. I also heard a traditional spiritual teacher say that. He was in his late 70s, and it was on the Red Lake Nation lands, and he knew about genetics and epigenetics, and he said, you know what? The symbolic benefits of ceremony are written into our DNA, and we need to know they're there, and we need to connect with them. I think that was wise advice. We all know that COVID is not just a real respiratory disease threat, it's also a symbolic trigger that reminds us of intergenerational trauma and personal past trauma. And this is not a seminar about those things, but that's some of the reasons why we especially are threatened by COVID, because it triggers some of our intergenerational traumas that we share, our family and personal traumas. So all the good Western medicine stuff listed there works to help keep us safe and in balance during the COVID pandemic, but so does smudging, so does traditional prayer, so do medicines from the earth, So does sweat lodge. So do other ceremonies. And we need to find a balanced combination of all those good things. Courage. Traditional healing ways are very compatible with modern neurophysiology and modern psychology. Many doctors and psychologists don't stop to think about it, but if they do, they will know that our ceremonies like smudging fit in with modern neurophysiology, modern psychology, and our ceremonies like sweat lodge fit in with modern cardiology and cardiac physiology. They work. Western medicine just didn't realize it was supporting us, but many Western providers are now beginning to realize that Western teachings do support our traditional cultural healing methods. So we can blend the best of both to help us with our COVID chaos and our COVID stress and our COVID fatigue and anger and frustration and discouragement and confusion. And we don't have to worry about people who are critical about our chosen traditional cultural and spiritual healing ways. We don't have to argue with them or be upset by them, but we don't have to be influenced by their critiques. We're COVID warriors, and good warriors use the tools and weapons available to win the battle. So we need to both give healing in our communities to help the people we're serving, and we need to share healing ourselves as COVID response individuals and teams, even if our team is just our own family. Compassion. Through the ages, from time immemorial, Native nations have valued individuals not based on how much we can get, but how much we can give and share. But of course, we live in modern 21st century times, and so we're influenced and distracted by the fact that modern Western society says you're not successful unless you get your share. So we get distracted by ambition and competition and trying to get our share of success. But it's very important to remember that traditionally, for thousands of years, our Native nations have taught that true success means being kind to ourselves, to our families, to our communities, being thankful for the gifts we've been giving and sharing them. So the other truth that requires great compassion is, we've all experienced this. Wouldn't it be easy if the people we helped during COVID were all very smart and very thankful and very cooperative? That would be easy, but we've all needed to help people who are clueless or angry or nasty or hateful or selfish or confused and despairing, and they're not easy to help. But as COVID warriors, we help those who need help. We don't just help the people it's easy to help. Respect. Being thankful is a kind of being respectful, and helping each other is a kind of being respectful. And respect, as it turns out, is a very powerful healing medicine that traditional teachers in Native nations have recommended for hundreds and thousands of years. And taking good care of ourselves is a form of respect. So it's a form of healing medicine. We all know about smallpox and measles and polio. Our ancestors sacrificed so that we could be here right now. And it's our turn now to make some sacrifices so our descendants can be here in the next generation and the generations to come. Honesty. It's perfectly okay to admit we're not having fun doing COVID response. I just heard someone this morning say, I just want to rip this mask off and stomp it. They weren't being nasty. They were just being honest. I'm sure we've all had that urge at one time or another in the last couple of years. We'd like this to be over. We'd like to forget about COVID and just go on without it. But, that's not how it's going to go. We're going to transition into a time when COVID becomes a seasonal surge, and we'll have to think about getting yearly boosters, maybe if we're old and have health problems. And we're going to have to learn to live with COVID. Our ancestors for a while had to learn how to live with smallpox, and certainly had to learn how to live with measles and polio. So we're going to have to make that transition. And there are simple and practical basic things we can each do to keep ourselves in good balance, good practical street level balance as we go through that process. Rose is going to talk about some of those, and I will at least briefly mention some of them. Humility. There's another story. You'll see the story listed up there, Winnebago, Muskrat, and the Flood. It's a good humility story, but there's another one that I have to tell from right here on Gawababiganikag. It's a story about a Ma'ingan Ikwe and Ma'ingan Anini, about a female and male wolf, partners for life. So I'll tell that on the other video. Creator has not asked us to give our lives against COVID. Creator is very happy for us to combine traditional and Western healing to protect ourselves, and traditional safety and Western public health safety. That's okay. We're not supposed to die fighting COVID. We're supposed to live fighting COVID. There are simple things we can do to prevent COVID infection, but there are also simple things we can do to prevent COVID frustration and chaos and despair and confusion and anger. Rose knows a lot of those things, and she's going to talk about them. We need to receive help as well as give it. We can't believe that we're made of stainless steel and Teflon. We need to receive help. And Rose will share some of those ways. And we need to help each other and not stand in each other's way as we continue to fight COVID. But Doc, it's better now, right? The case counts are down, the hospitals are emptying out, and it's better. Well, yes, it is, but I have a favorite saying. Sometimes the tree falls after the wind stops. And you all know the bumper sticker. I deserve this nervous breakdown. I've earned it. And as soon as this crisis is over, I'm going to have it. So you can smile, but we all of us on the COVID warrior team are at risk for having increased stress symptoms, even though the COVID case counts and hospitalization numbers are going down. So we can't really let our guard down. We still need cultural and psychological first aid right now. Rose is going to talk and share and teach and give us good gifts. And I'm 100% with what she's going to say. It's benefited me in my own personal life here as a member of our COVID response team. So I hope you will listen really carefully to what Rose has to offer as we go on with this seminar. In a little bit, I'm going to tell you a story, and I won't belabor this. I'll kind of add this at the beginning when I tell the story. But basically, the story I'm going to tell you is called the Chi De Waegan Story. And it's a story of forgiveness and reconciliation and cleansing and healing and balancing and protection and comfort and guidance and meaning and purpose. How's that for a mouthful? But we need all those things right now as we learn to live with the transition from pandemic to endemic COVID. So I'll talk about those things in the story. It's a wonderful story. It can't be recorded. It can't be written down. So please don't make any personal recordings. But you know what? Creator might ask you to tell this story. So listen carefully, because you might be the one, just like I was. I didn't expect I'd ever tell this. And I've now told it about 50 or 60 times. And every time I tell it, I learn something new. So this is not all, folks. I'm going to clear out and let Rose get busy here. But I'm very happy to have introduced you to what we're going to talk about. And now, Parker, you may have to help me to shut this down. Miigwech.
Welcome, everybody. I just have to say that it's just been a privilege to be able to connect with the National American Indian and Alaskan Native Mental Health Training and Technology Center, as well as to be able to connect with Dr. Gardner. What a huge gift, certainly for me. So thank you, Dr. Gardner. I learn every time I hear you speak. I do want to mention that we are going to try to give you a break. Won't be exactly after the first hour, but we are going to give you a break after the first hour and then after the second hour. So we're not expecting you to sit here nonstop for 3 hours. We also certainly hope that we'll be able to give time for questions. So, but if you have questions as they come up, please put them in chat. And I know Megan will help us deal with those when we get to the point of trying to deal with questions. So please don't hesitate to do that. So I'm going to begin with a video that Dr. Gardner recommended. He actually sent me a number of videos, but I particularly like this one because it's a knowledge keeper, Anishinaabe knowledge teacher who's a woman, an elder woman. And so it's 17 minutes long, and let's see if we can make this happen.
Bonjour. My Anishinaabe knows when Skogish Bokwe, Mokondo Deb, Niu Mede. That means I'm at my 4th level of that understanding in the Mede Lodge, Medewin Lodge. My name is Marie Eshkebak, and I'm from Wikwemekong here, the community. Lived here most of my life. Had to leave for a while to go to school. And I would like to share a little bit today about the 6th prophecy. And those of you who have been listening to these prophecies over the years, it's been mentioned by various people. But in that 6th prophecy, it talks about this this illness, that's going to put people out of balance, and it's going to change our lives. And at this time when the earth is very still, there's no trains, no planes, nothing's moving. And we are asked to be in solitude, to stay at home and we do that. Well, those of you who have gone out to fast, to sit on Mother Earth, you will know what that feeling is. Because when you sit upon Mother Earth, you're in solitude. And that's the way we are right now. We're in solitude. And it's at this time where many of us, we connect with that level, that 5th level of consciousness, they call it. It's the 5th level of your connection with the earth. Right now, we're working the garden, and for Willie and I, we're making that connection to the earth, because the earth gives us sustenance, gives us life. And also, some of us are going down by the water, and you're making that connection with the water, and also making the connection with the birds, with the animals on the earth. And so those of us who have received that training over the years, who have gone out to fast every year, you will know what it is to stay quiet, to have that connection within you. just to give an example of that connection, one morning I was praying with my tobacco, and I was talking to the birds, miigwech for the beautiful singing, that those songs in the morning that they sing around 5, 6 o'clock. I saw 2 of them come to my window. They just flew by my window. And right then and there, I knew I made a connection. And over there in Chiging, we went to do a burial ceremony. And again, I was talking about the birds and making that connection. And one of the people that were there said they heard the birds singing when I was talking. And so it's like they're connecting. And the moon teachings, we were given those as grandmothers to share with the people. The moon, we plant by the moon. If the moon is, there's a new moon coming up this week. And after that new moon, hopefully we'll get some rain to water our soils, to water them, to make them moist. So the moon, in that original teaching, when Jeminado, he said to the Nokomis, you look after this creation now, you take care of it, you renew it, you give it life. And so that responsibility was given to us as Kwe to pray for that water and teach our young ones, our children, teach our grandchildren about the water. Take them down to the river or to the lake in April after ice breakup. Take them down there and have them rub that new water, that fresh water, that clean water, that powerful water. They say that's very powerful, that water, after Shkukumekwe goes on her fast, winter fast, that first water. And wash your hands. If those of you who work with medicines, put that water on your hands. Wash that. We all have that third eye, that ability to see ahead and to feel ahead and to know what's coming. Wash your third eye. We all have that third eye. Wash your mouth. If you're one that uses foul language, wash your mouth. Ask the spirit to take away that foul language from you, especially young people. I know a lot of you are restless today. A lot of you are angry today. A lot of you don't know what to do with yourselves. So take the time to do that for yourself. Wash your eyes, put that fresh water in your eyes. Because when you get to my age, you might get a sickness called cataracts. I don't have those yet, but that's what elderly people get, is cataracts. So take care of your physical self. And also your spirit self. When you go and sit on Mother Earth, when you go and renew yourself, when you go and learn those teachings of patience, when you look at a tree, you learn patience from that tree, because that tree is sitting there in one place. It grows, we grow. It has life, we have life. And so that's how you learn that patience. Ask that tree to teach you what patience is, and to feel it and to know it. Because a lot of us don't know it. We have a hard time with patience. You want everything right away. And your first bundle is given to you when you bring life into this world as a woman. So teach your children, give them their first bundle. This is a feast bowl that we use in our lodges. It's just a plain wooden bowl. Give that to your children as their first bundle. When we put our young, new women out to fast, that's the first thing they get is that bundle. And they hang on to that for a whole year while they're on their cycle. That way they'll know who they are as a Kwe. Wear that skirt. Don't be afraid to put that skirt on. The spirit recognizes you as Kwe when you wear that skirt. And as you get older, we have a responsibility to pray, to sing, and to talk for that water. And the head one is that the head one of Nebe Minado is that there's a head one out there. He's not coming into my mind. I'm probably not meant to say it, but begin to work with that solitude, because that illness that's here, it was prophecy that's coming. There's a bad, I call it a bad spirit, that illness. And our people have gone through a lot of that in the past. There was the early 1900s when we had the Spanish flu. Our people went through that. There's also the smallpox. Our people went through that. And now we have SARS that came. Now we have this COVID-19. And it's taking a lot of people. I have a friend in Navajo land, in Window Rock, Arizona, and they're getting it hard. There's over 100 people that have died in their community, and 1,000 people have it. So I encourage you to stay home and to do social distancing. Don't give our security people a hard time over there, because they're trying to keep us safe. That's what it is. They want to keep us safe. And just try to practice what our ancestors left for us. And it's all there in our lodges. And right now, some of you may know how to meditate. Okay, do that by yourselves. Talk to the spirit, talk to the animals, make that connection. Right now, I'm trying to make the connection with the bear, because I have grandchildren living here with me. And a bear has been up here every year, but I haven't seen him yet. So I'm asking him not to come too close to my house, because I have little ones here. Make that connection, talk to them. Because that's who we are as Anishinaabe. We have that spirit within us. Nourish your spirit. This is the time to do it. Nourish that spirit by talking to the animals, by talking to Jemendo in the mornings. Do that every day if you can, and you will have that solitude. You may have not gone out there and fasted in the bush. And that's one of the most powerful things for our young men to do, is to go out there and sit with Mother Earth and learn about that respect. When that sun comes up in the morning, you feel the warmth of that sun. And then you have great respect for everything that's been given to us. Don't throw your cigarette butts on the ground. A lot of these things you can start doing within yourself. And I especially want to, talk to the younger people of this community, because I know that some of your minds are racing right now. You want to go here, you want to go there, you want to do something. Find some kind of hobby to keep you busy. If it's gardening, that's the time to make that connection and plant your food. Because our ancestors who have gone on, they warned us that something is coming. And those of us who paid attention to that, we know that it's here now. Get ready for the winter, because we don't know what the winter is going to bring. Get that firewood. Get yourselves a wood stove. Make an oven outside. That's my next project, is to make an oven outside. there's a song I sing in the morning that helps me to look ahead. You sing that song, you're talking to the spirit. That song will help you to look ahead. And I encourage you to do that for yourselves. Don't look back there, because back there is darkness right now. Back there is darkness. And I really, really feel that something bigger is coming. And don't let fear take over your mind. This COVID-19, that's what it's doing to a lot of us. It's creating fear within our mind. And when you carry fear, you're living in a negative state of mind. Pick up your sema, pick up your tobacco. Talk to the spirit. Talk to Geminido to take that fear away, because that's the first thing that comes when you die, is that fear. And it's darkness comes when no one lights that sacred fire for you when you pass. So respect that fire, respect the water, respect all of creation. You know, it's go and learn what that is. Because when we pass away, you can take that with you. You can take respect with you. You can take patience with you. But you can't take your fancy boat, your fancy car, your fancy skidoo. You can't take those things with you, because those are physical things. And that COVID-19 carries fear. It's what it's bringing to us. It's a negative. It's it's a strong negative spirit, that COVID-19, and it's affecting a lot of people. It's it's giving people heart attacks. It's giving people strokes. It's making people sick. That's how strong it is. It can make you sick. The more that you think about it, it's going to make you sick. So take the time then to learn what our ancestors left for us. There's not many people who carry these teachings today. I learned from those who have gone on. I learned from my parents. I learned how to plant from my parents, and I still carry that survival skill. And I'm teaching my grandkids right now how to do these things for their own survival. I could go on and on and on, because I have carried many teachings. So I'll share that little bit with you today. Now, we wish.
So in just a few minutes, with the time we have before break, I want to give you a little bit of information about the Red Cross Virtual Family Assistance Center. It's important to me to tell you that as a non-Native person, I wish to acknowledge the historical trauma that you and your loved ones have experienced and the current trauma and grief which you experience. I intend to do no harm in doing these presentations. Please tell me if in any way I offend you, so I may address my harm to you and learn from it and apologize. I want to thank each of you for all the work that you're doing in the positions that you're doing during this difficult time during the pandemic. We know that it's been a very tough time for frontline workers, whether you're a Native person serving Native communities, or if you're a non-Native person serving Native communities, we know that it's been a tough time, and I want to thank you. I want to acknowledge that it's not been easy for you all. Many of you have not been able to work from home or from a computer like many of the rest of us. It's important to thank your administration, medical, dental, behavioral health, outreach services, and your custodians for the work that they've done during COVID. I want to introduce you to the Red Cross Virtual Family Assistance Center. Because you'll have access to this video, I would encourage you to check out the Red Cross Virtual Family Assistance Center website. So the Red Cross Virtual Family Assistance Center has been operational since May of 2020, being able to receive phone calls from folks who've lost loved ones to COVID. So we have volunteers who are taking calls Monday through Friday from 9 Eastern time until 9 Eastern time in the evening, being able to take calls from folks. Our team is made up of spiritual care, mental health volunteers, caseworkers, and mental health, spiritual caseworkers, and healthcare volunteers. So it's a great team. I'm honored to be part of that team, to be able to know that when we take the calls, if there's a specific healthcare need, I can refer to a healthcare worker. And those of us that are mental health volunteers get calls specific to being able to help them with mental health questions and the need to be able to talk about what's happened. I don't need to tell you all, there's been so many people that have lost loved ones who haven't been able to be with them when they pass, who haven't been able to do the traditional ceremonies when they pass because of the way COVID treated everybody. So then in addition to that, we've been doing these trainings for frontline workers. So please pass the word to any of the programs that you might be familiar with, that we're here. That's the phone number. We're here to support frontline workers with free, all of our services are free, individual and group sessions. So I've been currently reached out with Native American groups in California, Nebraska, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota, which is how I met Dr. Gardner. So pass the word if you know of any other frontline worker groups that are serving Native or non-Native folks who want to be able to get the psychological first aid training, which we try to cater to what the individual groups need. And know that anybody who is interested in the support can go on the Red Cross Virtual Family Assistance Center and look up. There's also resources on there for providing other information for folks about COVID. For example, there's been, initially people didn't know about the FEMA monies that were available for funerals. In my being on the call center, there were so many calls initially about people trying to find monies to bury their loved ones, because most people didn't have $9,000 to $12,000 sitting around to be able to bury their loved ones. And I've taken calls from folks who've lost upwards of 7 family members during COVID. So tough stuff for loved ones to deal with. You know, Dr. Gardner talked with you about the Ojibwe wheel. I like this because it uses the wheel and talks about the physical, the spiritual, the mental, and the emotional pieces of self-care with COVID. And again, because of our time limits, I'm not going to go into all this, but that whole emotional piece of feeling and being aware of your emotions, calling and connecting with a loved one, listening to your favorite music, creating a gratitude list. When Dr. Gardner talks about the Western world and his culture and how important that is, I've always had a heart for Native Americans and how they do life. And for example, being one with nature, you know, being able to be out in nature and listen to the birds, talk to the birds, be around the animals, look at the trees, learn from the trees. That's not been hard for me to do. And so his thing about laughter is so important. It's okay to cry. It's okay to grieve. For some people, using a journal, being able to share your stories, because that's healing also, being able to seek support. So I really encourage you to look at this slide, look at how the physical, the spiritual, the mental, emotional fits in, whether you're Native or not Native, in terms of our own self-care. And, you know, as a group of volunteers taking the calls that we've been taking since the Virtual Family Assistance Center has been in existence, we too have to look at how do we take care of ourselves? How do we compensate for the hard stories that we've heard for a very long time? So know that with all that you've done during COVID, it's important that you're taking care of yourself. The mindfulness, the breathing deep, being able to take time to reflect, all of that is so important. I want to make sure I give you the break now. So my clock says 2000 says 2:07. So if we give you a 10-minute break at this point, that means we're back together at 2:17. So at 2:17, we'll start again. Thank you all. Again, don't hesitate to put questions in chat. I know, Dr. Gardner, if you take a look at chat, there's some comments in there for you specific to your presentation. See you in 10 minutes.
Bonjour, hello. This is Doc Gardner. I'm going to fill in the half an hour blank spot left in this psychological first aid seminar, where I told the Chi De Waegan story, the big drum story. I hope you attended live and heard that story, because it can't be recorded either on paper or by audiovisual media. So Rose and Megan and I talked, and I'm going to fill in with some stories. We'll see how this goes. The stories are basically as listed in my PowerPoint slides, but I made a change. I'm going to start out with the story that talks about truth, De Waegan. It's the Ojibwe creation story. Creator Gitchimanidu was all alone at the beginning and was lonely, and laid down and slept and had a wonderful dream about worlds with geology and climate and plants and animals and all the other wonderful things that we have now. And when Creator woke up from the dream, Creator began singing a beautiful song all about the dream, and the singing of the song resulted in the reality of our world, our planetary system, our galaxy, our universe. What a wonderful story. There are many more details, but I'm interested in the addendum at the end of the story. Creator made everything except two-legged human beings, and Creator gave the rest of creation a chance to learn about itself, learn about each other, get settled in. Everything was going fine, and then Creator called a meeting of the representatives of all the rest of creation. And of course, everybody came to the meeting. It was all good. And Creator said, I need to tell you that I haven't quite finished creation. I have one more part of creation to sing into being, and that will be humans. They'll walk on two legs, and they will be very skilled at building things, but they're also going to be the most dependent creature on earth. They will depend on everyone and everything around them. Without help, they probably won't last a week here on earth. I also need to warn you that human beings will have the potential for being very hateful, very destructive, very violent, very ignorant, very stubborn. It won't be easy to live on the same planet with them. But I have an important work for them to do in the star world after they live their human lives here. And living here on Earth will be the training they need to get ready. So I'm telling you all because I would like you to talk it over. I am sure that if you all are not willing to sacrifice yourselves to help human beings survive, they will not survive. And in that case, there's really no reason for me to create them. So I'm going to let you talk together, and I'm just going to wander off here in the garden, and I won't eavesdrop. You guys go ahead and talk it over, and I'll be back in a while, and you can let me know your decision. If you're willing to sacrifice yourselves to help keep human beings alive, then I will create them. And if you're not willing to make that great sacrifice, all of you, then I'm not going to create them because there would be no point. So Creator left and went for a long walk, whatever that means, and came back. And the representatives had talked with all the rest of creation, and their answer, you already know. They said, we talked it over. It may be tough, but we're willing to sacrifice ourselves so that human beings can be created, can live on earth, and learn the lessons you need to have them learn so they can do that greater work in the star world after their lives on earth. That's the story to the addendum of creation, the creating of human beings. The next story I'm going to tell you is a story about my main spiritual teacher here on Gawa Babiganikag, Wimba Okan, actually Wimba Okan Ogima. He was my doctor, and I was his doctor. And we laughed together and cried together, and we both learned from each other. I think I learned a lot more from him, though, than he learned from me. But when Ba Okan used to tease me about Western medical doctors and placebos, he used to say, you know, Gardner, I just feel really bad for you Western doctors. When you're trying to develop a new Western medicine to treat your patients, you have to spend about $100 million or more just to jump through the hoops to get it all worked up. And then you have to get an okay by the Food and Drug Administration. And to do that, you have to run tests. And to run tests, you have to use placebos. And in your research studies, a third of the people who take placebos will get a very good response. And you know you're giving them sugar pills. And you chuckle about that behind your hand and think you're fooling them. But I've got news for you, Gardner. Creator has placed within each of us two-legged human beings very powerful healing pathways. They're in our DNA. They're in our history. They're in our blood. They work very well. They're not perfect any more than anything else involving humans is perfect, but they work very well. But you see, the thing is, for human beings to get the benefit of those powerful, natural healing pathways, they have to believe that they work. And what you're doing with your placebos is you're actually accidentally activating those wonderful natural healing mechanisms. So Gardner, if I were you, I wouldn't laugh too hard the next time you're doing a study and have to give some of those patients sugar pills, because what you're really doing is acknowledging the natural healing that Creator built into all of us. I think that's a wonderful story, and I just am sad that I can't introduce you to Wimba Okan. He's already gone to the Star World, but what a delightful therapeutic sense of humor he had. That was a story about wisdom, and I'm now going to move on to a story about compassion. And that story that I choose to use today is the story about the first deer kill ceremony here on Gawa Babiganikag. Our young people need to learn how to hunt and gather to provide for their families. And many of our young people reach the point where they can hunt with their parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles. And at some point, they achieve their first deer kill, Wawashkeshi. The deer sacrifices itself. And with that first kill, there is a feast and a ceremony for that young person. And they've been prepared and taught. And when the ceremony comes, friends and family all gather together, and many different foods have been made. Certainly traditional foods like manuman wild rice, and garden foods, and deer meat from that first kill. And you can just imagine the joy and laughter and congratulations that might go on. But basically, here's what happens when it comes time for the feast. One of the parents offer the young hunter a spoon or fork full of the deer meat. And the young hunter says, Gawin, miigwech Gawin, thank you, but no. There are children in our village who don't have enough food. Give them the food first. And the parent says, well, okay. And then the parent puts that spoon or fork full of wawashkeshi wias, deer meat, back, and takes another spoonful and offers it to the young hunter. And this time the young hunter says, miigwech Gawin, thank you, but no, there are elders who are weak and have health problems and they can't get out and hunt anymore. You give them this food first. And the parent says, well, okay. And they put back the second spoonful. And then they offer a third spoonful or forkful of the deer meat to the young hunter. And the young hunter says, miigwech Gawin, thank you, but no, look at all my family and my friends here at this wonderful celebration. None of them have eaten yet. You give them that food first. And the parent says, well, okay, and puts that spoonful back. And then and only then does the feast begin. And it is a wonderful time of joy and celebration and congratulations to the young hunter. And at the end of the feast, the young hunter takes all of the wawashkeshi wias, all of the deer meat that's stored in a freezer or wherever it is, and goes out into the community and gives it all away. Gives it all away. There's nothing left, not a mouthful. And the reason for that is Native Nation people, as they come of age, learn that we are not measured in success by how much we can get in life. We are measured in success by how much we can give and share in life. Another beautiful story. Next is respect. I've moved the story of Winnebago, muskrat, and the flood to this spot In the Anishinaabe spiritual tradition, just like in the Jaganashi, the European heritage spiritual tradition, there's a story about a great flood. And just like in the Jaganashi tradition, in the Anishinaabe tradition, it happens because people have become hateful and selfish and greedy and hurtful, and things aren't going well, and Creator is at a loss about what to do other than something very dramatic and traumatic to try to turn things around. So the flood happens. But in this story, there's no boat. Winnebago is the God man in Anishinaabe spiritual teachings, and Winnebago finds himself treading water in very, very, very deep water. And some of all the rest of the creatures of creation are there around him, either treading water or flying. And Winnebago is very concerned that they're all going to tire out. And so he sees a very large log floating in the floodwater, and he motions everybody to swim or fly over, and he organizes the creatures taking turns resting on the log and then back in the water or back in the air. And as the moments go by, Winnebago has a thought, and he says to the rest of the creatures, you know, I think that I could make a new island for us all to live on. But to do that, I'm going to need two things. Number one, I'm going to need somewhere to put the island. And number two, I'm going to need a handful, a pawful of dirt from the bottom of this flood. So any volunteers? And Mikinak, the great turtle, says, you can use my back, Winnebago. I'll volunteer to support this new island where all can live. So check that one off the list. And then one by one, all the uppity, spectacular, skilled divers say, well, I'll dive down and get some dirt for you. And they all do. The duck and the loon and the hell diver and the otter and the beaver and even some of the bigger creatures that aren't particularly great divers but want to be credited with their effort all try. And every single one of them in succession comes spluttering up to the surface, choking and gagging and spitting out water, and with no dirt. And eventually they all say, you know, Winnebago, it's really too bad, but I don't think we can do it. I don't think we can get you the dirt. And then Muskrat, small, unimpressive, quiet, in a moment of silence says, I'll get you the dirt. And it's better than Saturday Night Live. Everybody breaks into a uproarious laughter. You, Muskrat? Yeah, like you can dive down and get dirt for Winnebago. Yeah, really, what a joke. Anyway, finally, Winnebago has to settle them all down. And he says, you know, I believe in respect for everyone and everything, respect for all of creation. And so let's just stop right here. Muskrat, I heard you. That's a very courageous offer. We will respect your offer. Go ahead, give it your best shot. And so without further ado, Muskrat dives into the water and disappears. And people are still kind of chuckling, trying not to irritate Winnebago by laughing out loud. But the seconds go by and turn into a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and pretty soon there's a lot of worried expressions. And Muskrat doesn't come back up, and everybody knows what that means. Muskrat has far exceeded any possibility of making it back to the surface. And so a little bit of mourning begins. Some of the creatures are feeling guilty for having made fun of Muskrat, and they start to say, you know, obviously he's given his life in this futile attempt, and what a brave creature, small as he is, insignificant as he is. We should honor him. We should have ceremony for him. And Winnebago just lets everybody talk their guiltiness out until finally, after way too long, Muskrat's body floats to the surface. And in fact, Muskrat is dead, and there's wailing, crying among the other creatures. But Winnebago quietly reaches down and opens Muskrat's tightly closed paw and finds a little bit of earth from the bottom. You see, Muskrat didn't save anything for the way back up. He gave everything. Winnebago says, okay, and proceeds to create Turtle Island, the continent on which we all live right now, North America. And the message of that story is a very stern one. And I would say right here and now, that Creator has not asked any of us to give our lives to die to save our family, friends, neighbors in the COVID pandemic. But we do have to make some sacrifices, and sometimes it's not the most spectacular person who makes the most effective sacrifice in this COVID battle we're fighting. So a good story to think about, but I want to emphasize Creator has not asked us to give our lives in the battle against COVID. We have many ways, transmission prevention practices, better ventilation in buildings, vaccination, boosting, testing, contact tracing, quarantine, isolation. They all work to help save lives. So this is not about dying to save people from COVID, but it's about respecting everyone's contribution, no matter how it seems to be, whether it seems to be a large contribution or whether it seems to be a small contribution. The next story is short, but I love it. It's the story about how I came to realize that Bigfoot, Magwaji the wilderness man, or Masabi the giant, actually lived here. I don't know if Masabi lives here now. Can't say. But the light switch went on and the light bulb lit up in my head a few years ago after many years of studying these 7 great teachings. You remember them. De Waegan Nibwakawan, Zonga De Ewan, Zagi Idiwin, Manaji Idiwin, Guayak Wadiziwin, Deba Den Dizuwin, or truth, wisdom, courage, compassionate love, respect, honesty, and humility. So, honesty. I had studied these teachings for years, and one day the thought popped into my head, hey, from time immemorial, hundreds, thousands of years ago, Anishinaabe teachers chose commonly present animals to link with these teachings to help remind Anishinaabe, the people, about the meaning and importance of these powerful teachings in everyday life. For example, truth is connected with Mikinak the turtle. Wisdom is connected with Umek the beaver. Compassion is connected with Migazi the eagle. Respect is connected with Mashkode Bajiki the buffalo. Humility is connected with Ma'ingan the wolf. And honesty is connected with Masabi, Bagwajianini, Bigfoot. And the thought finally came to my mind, wait a second. Anishinaabe spiritual teachers are pretty smart. Would they have chosen for the 6 other teachings commonly seen animals that lived close to the people that could serve as powerful reminders of the importance of the teaching? And then would they have centuries ahead of time chose the National Enquirer's favorite myth, Bigfoot, to symbolize honesty? No, of course not. So I don't know if Bigfoot exists now. I have no idea, and I don't have any agenda, but I realized that underlying the beautiful 7 great teachings is just a brief little extra teaching. Bagwajiwanini or Masabi or Bigfoot or Sasquatch did at some time in the past exist on the face of the earth. And in fact, there's a story there too that I'm not going to tell you today because we're losing our half hour. But basically, Masabi came to this earth with a purpose. Creator assigned Masabi, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, the job of quietly watching human beings and trying to anticipate us pathetic two-legged human beings getting out of line and trying to do something to point us back in the right direction. So that's actually what Anishinaabe spiritual teachings say about the purpose of Bigfoot. Humility, the 7th teaching. I added something locally that is very beautiful and powerful, and I don't know if my voice will break or if I'll cry, but we'll see. I have in past years when telling this, but my wife Gail and I have friends, Patrice and Steve. Patrice was a nurse at our local IHS clinic, and she and her husband also farmed, but basically they ranched. They raised buffalo. So they lived way out in the boonies, as the saying goes, in some pasture land near heavily wooded forest land. And they occasionally heard wolves howl, and both of them are accomplished photographers among their other talents. And they decided, it'd be great to get some wolf pictures if we could do it respectfully and safely for the wolves. And one day they saw a roadside deer kill, and Steve said, I'm gonna set up a wolf bait stand, and then I'm gonna set up my telephoto lens camera several hundred yards away, and I'm just going to take a day off from ranching and sit in the stand and see if I can get some wolf pictures. So, in fact, that's what he did. And he came home toward the end of the day, and Patrice, as she tells the story, says, I saw that he was crying and I thought something terrible must have happened. And Steve smiled and said, no, terribly wonderful, I guess. He had been sitting in the stand watching with his telephoto camera, and a perfectly healthy looking Ma'ingan Ikwe, a female wolf, came out of the woods, very carefully crept up to the deer kill wolf bait and sniffed it over and checked it out, didn't eat any food, and then disappeared back into the woods. And Steve thought, well, that's odd. Not hungry? That's good. Wawashkeshi wiyas, that's good deer meat. But some minutes later, that female wolf came slowly out of the woods, leading her male life partner. And Steve saw immediately that this male wolf was emaciated, limping, not using one leg, obvious mange that he could see with the telephoto camera lens, obviously malnourished. This male wolf was dying. And the female wolf led her partner to the deer kill and waited quietly, not eating anything, while the male the male wolf tried desperately to eat some of the deer meat, and it did not have much success, maybe had a bite or two, and it just wasn't able to continue. And the female wolf partner realized that this wasn't going to work, and she led her male partner back into the woods slowly because of his illness and weakness. And minutes later, she came back to the wolf bait deer kill, and then and only then did she eat some of the meat before going back, disappearing into the woods to rejoin her dying partner. I made it through without my voice breaking. Anyway, Patrice and Steve said that that was one of the most beautifully sad but powerful natural world teachings they had ever received about true humility. So I offer that to you. That's not a made-up story. That's the real deal. And Steve's pictures weren't all that great. And when asked why they weren't that good, Steve would laugh and say, the reason those pictures aren't very good is because I was bawling like a baby while I tried to take them, and I couldn't get the camera focused and the settings right because I was crying too hard. So those are the teachings, and I'm just about out of time. You know, you're going to have to ask the healing spirits, the Minomani Duke, to give you what you need from those stories. That's how it works. I don't know what you need, but I hope something you need is in those stories. I'm going to finish by sharing something that I have only recently put down on paper, and Rose will smile because this is a Red Cross psychological first aid seminar. I call this Red Circle cultural first aid. So you guys are getting the best of both, Red Cross and Red Circle. I'm just going to read these to you so I get them right. And again, you will have to decide what this means. I can't say what it means for you, but this is what I've been given to share with you at the end of this story session. Red Circle First Aid. Start each day with thanks, end each day with thanks, and in between, walk the talk of your thankfulness. Accept a higher power, even if you think you don't need one, because you will live and die in debt to that something greater than yourself. Choose merciful teachings to guide your thoughts, actions, and decisions, because your value will be measured by how much you can give, not how much you can get. If you make the effort, you can find all the ethical wisdom you need in your native nation's language, culture, spiritual stories, and ceremonies. The healing medicine of ancient teachings is coded into your DNA, waiting to be awakened. Try to be humble, generous, respectful, and helpful, especially to elders, to children, to women, to the vulnerable, and to all the rest of creation that sacrifices so human beings can survive. Share laughter often in kind and gentle ways. Take care of yourself with healthy food, drink, friends, and pastimes. Plug your ears and walk away from the Wendigo song of shadow cravings. When you can't do that by yourself, accept responsible help. Work without complaining, rest without guilt, play enthusiastically, speak and pray honestly, defend against injustice. Forgive easily, judge no one, bully no one, wound no one. Spend quiet time outdoors frequently by moving water, trees, and open sky if possible. Smudge to help return healing spiritual messages and memories into the center of your thoughts and emotions. Discover and share stories of forgiveness and reconciliation. Miigwech, Anishinabeg, thank you, people. Gakin Indinawe Maganag, O Matakie Oyasin. I thank all our relatives for this chance to share together. Gigawaba Min Minoa, I will see you again. Wopila Tanka. I greatly thank you for your place in creation. I thank creation for giving you a place, and I thank creation for giving us all a place. Aho, Miigwech, meet you.
The elements of, we talked about the elements of healing. So I think it's a great visual of how healing can happen and how it can be different for everybody. And unfortunately, some of those people, some of the people we work with and some of the people that are our colleagues have not only experienced violence and poverty, but also historical trauma and oppression. So for some, it's a real load of complicated grief. But those are the ways for people to work through healing that we can all use. And I just really appreciate, she was involved with Indian Country Child Trauma Center. Somebody told me that the funding for that has gone away. I haven't checked into it lately, but that's the last that I had heard. But she really did some good work that I've found in doing my research on these topics. Minnesota Department of Health has actually done quite a bit in putting information together on mental health and taking care of yourself in response to COVID. One of the big ones is what can we control? And I'm not going to show it today, but in the past I've shown actually a meditation that really asks you for 7 minutes to focus on that which you have control over, because so often we're trying to control things we have no control over. So if you're really feeling stressed, take a look at, is this something I really have control over or not? So, and in that piece of whatever we're stressed about, what do we have control over? So always taking a look at, and it's number one, focusing on what you can control, including your thoughts and behaviors, because we can control our behaviors. We can control our thoughts. If we choose to wake up with an attitude of gratitude, that's controlling our thoughts. If we get into what we call stinking thinking, just, going down that road of negativity, that has a great impact on our wellness. So know that it's important that you look at that which you can control. So anytime you're in trouble or you're working with people, look at what do you have control over? And what steps can you take to gain back that control? Remember that you're resilient, and so is all of humankind. We'll get through this. So resiliency, the thing I like to ask people in terms of resiliency is asking them, what has worked for you in the past of being able to move on from whatever event you had to deal with? And for some people, it's prayer. For some people, it's spending time with others. For some people, it's isolation, having alone time, spending time in nature. So what's worked for you? And it varies for everybody. But I also I think it's really important in the work that we do, not to give people answers, but to give them questions that will allow them to come up with their own answers, because then that's about taking back control also. When people want to just look to me for the answers, I believe they have the answers, and I believe the group has answers. I do critical incident stress debriefing with first responders, and I just happen to be out on a debriefing. And so when I have somebody in the group who says to me, well, what would you recommend for this? I always make sure I go back to the group and say, because I believe that collective group of first responders has the answers, and it's never failed me, but they have the answers. And so that it comes from within their own group of first responders, giving them the answers. And then I'll say, it's obvious to me you had some great ideas here and suggestions for the question that was raised. Do you do what you can to reduce your risks, take comfort that you're caring for yourself and others? I mean, let's be clear. When people say to me, Rose, why do you volunteer so much? Don't you get tired of all this volunteering? Come on, there's huge rewards for me in doing this volunteer work. And during COVID, when I wasn't able to be out and about, it was a great option to be able to be on the computer and taking phone calls from people who are losing loved ones to COVID. So the rewards are multiple for me in terms of the volunteer work that I do. And yet I also have to take time to heal myself and to take time for myself. Last year, I've always wanted to get up to Voyageurs National Park. Last year, I finally got up to Voyageurs National Park. When I heard the woman whose name I just forgot, who did the piece about her storytelling, oh my goodness, the sunrises at Voyageur National Park are incredible. And I'll be going up there again over Labor Day, and I am not going to be sleeping in because I want to see those sunrises and I want to see those sunsets. They're worth a great deal. So taking care of ourselves, using technology to connect with others when we needed to, looking for the good stuff. I'm not going to go through all these, but I do want to mention the Disaster Distress Helpline, SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration. They have great resources. And as a Red Crosser, we use the SAMHSA band all the time that has the number on it for the how to call the distress hotline. It's 24/7 number for folks to be able to call, because like, for example, our center wasn't open all the time. So folks can always connect with the trained counselor to be able to talk. We certainly got calls from people who had chronic mental health issues, and this just exacerbated their stress, their anxiety, their depression. So being able to reach out to the disaster distress line is important. So take a look at those when you have time. I'm not going to cover them all, but I think it's a good resource. So when we look at resiliency, it's again in the circle. Again, one of the reasons I love the Native American way is that when we sit in circle, we're all equal. When we do debriefings, we sit in circle. There's no hierarchy of somebody's up here and the rest of you are out there. We're in circle. Resiliency in circle means that we teach life skills, we set clear, consistent boundaries, we increase pro-social bonding, providing opportunities for meaningful participation. This is what they call the Resiliency Wheel: setting and communicating high expectations, providing and caring support. Resiliency, all of us have the capacity to be resilient. Human beings are a resilient breed of folks. Now we're going to skip over the break, and I'm not going to be able to cover much of this with you today because of what else I think is important, but I want you to know about this resource. And I just skipped over it more than I wanted to skip over it. Come on. All right, what happened? Now it won't let me go back one. Parker, is this another?
So you're not in your presentation, I don't think.
I went out of my presentation again.
Well, I feel like you,
This one went out of your presentation.
yeah.
Parker.
Now
am
you're
I-
back in your
Now you're-
presentation.
Oh my goodness. I don't understand why it's not letting me double click on the, so if it's not gonna let me, I did this earlier today. Now am I still in my presentation?
No, you went back out again.
Oh, that thing you're clicking on is a link that takes you to here.
There you're back in.
All right, I'm not gonna open this up, but because of time, I'm okay with not opening it. But I want you to be aware. There's a psychological first aid. It's like a 30-some page document that is for COVID frontline workers in American, Indian, Alaskan Native communities. It's written very simply, very specifically to be able to give you information and to use it in your families or with those that you work with in how to recognize what has been the impact of COVID in Native communities and Alaskan Native communities, as well as tips for how to cope with COVID and the response from COVID. There's exercises, so it can be used if you're doing group work or if you're doing educational work, that you can go in there and get some tools from that to be able to use. It recognizes the losses that the Native communities have experienced with loss of their ceremonies. I mean, I can't tell you in the calls that I've taken as part of the Red Cross Virtual Family Assistance Center, how often we hear absolute despair in hearing that they just haven't been able to do their traditional ceremonies during the height of COVID, and that they were basically in lockdown in crowded family settings on the reservations, and that not being able to get out has been very tough for the kids, the young people, to be able to get out and do what they typically do, and not to be able to memorialize and do the typical cultural ceremonies that they do over the loss of a loved one, especially the loss of elders, as they have such high regard for their elders. So there's some really good information in here, and that'll be part of what you're going to get in the handouts, and it'll be online with the YouTube online that the National American Indian and Alaskan Native Mental Health Center will be putting out there. So I really would encourage you to take a look at that psychological first aid that's been developed specifically for frontline workers in American Indian and Alaskan Native communities. So the stress continuum, I think that's important for you to take a look at also, to know that this was put together by the National Center for Post-Trauma Stress Disorder, so that what does it mean to be in the green zone? What does it mean to be in the yellow zone? What does it mean to be in the orange zone? What does it mean to be in the red zone? And what kind of actions to take? So what is your stress continuum, and what does it mean? And how do you take actions? So for example, if in the green zone, it's a state of wellness, I'm just going to give you a couple of examples. The actions to take: reflect on resiliency that you've been using, continue the healthy habits. If you find yourself in the yellow zone, it's a state of mild distress or impairment. And the actions is recognizing your own limits and notice what triggers you, and what find strategies that minimize the stressors. In the injured zone, in the orange zone, it's a state of more severe or persistent distress that leaves an impact or scare. So the actions there is, one is, for example, don't isolate. That's important that you're not isolating. reaching out and to have a conversation that supports your well-being. So all of us need that, no matter how trained we are, how skilled we are, we all need that. What does it mean to be in the red zone? That's a person who has a clinical mental health disorder and unhealed stress injury that can cause a life impairment. And you know that there are those folks walking around. So being able to reach out to professional resources and follow healthcare providers' recommendations, staying connected, connecting people with support systems. We made many referrals to the National Association of Mental Health, Mental Illness to be able to hook people up with chronic mental illness who were calling, because if they already had chronic mental illness and then they had to deal with COVID and loss of loved ones during COVID, it just made it much more difficult. So psychological first aid, this is another good handout. We talk about, for the healthcare professionals, personal protective equipment. One of the saddest calls that I ever took on the call center line for Red Cross was calls from healthcare workers, loved ones who were trying to find monies to bury their loved ones who died of COVID initially as healthcare workers. Thankfully, the monies came around from FEMA for people to be able to get help with burying their loved ones. But oh my gosh, when you think of healthcare workers doing all that they did, and as a result of what they did initially in those first months, the first year or so, and then the healthcare worker would die, and then their families calling, trying to find monies to be able to bury their loved ones. I have to be honest, there was part of me, it's like, I cannot believe that there isn't resources to help the healthcare workers' family bury their loved ones after all they did as healthcare workers. So this particular document is what is the psychological, personal, professional, the PPEs as psychological PPEs. So it's a good comparison, an analogy. The resource list that I want to show you, I'm not going to go through all these by any means. I've tried to keep up with some of the newer resources, but these are resources you can click on and look at. Moral injury is an important one when you look at being frontline workers, because there's certainly been a moral injury with what you've had to deal with as frontline workers. That it's just, COVID has presented issues that just aren't typical, and the moral injury has been there. So this resource list, including NAMI, psychological first aid, American Indian, resources for immediate response. So again, numbers to be able to call and text. And some of these were very specific to Native Americans and the resources with Native Americans. Now we're at 3:23. So Dr. Gardner, this is gonna work. So I'm gonna do this one because we wanna have time for questions. So I'm gonna do this one. Then I'm gonna have a quick conversation with Dr. Gardner because I wanna make sure we have time for the questions. This is beautiful. Dr. Gardner introduced me to this. It's 4 minutes long. I just want, Parker, you're gonna say, Rose, what are you doing? I wanted to see if I could make it full screen. And I should be able to.
Sacred earth, we have lost our way. Once we knew you as mother, now we wander in darkness, lost and empty. Help us to find our way back to you, grandmother. You are the ground that feeds us, the soil that heals us, the land that binds us together as one people. Teach us once more to walk upon this earth in a sacred manner, and to find once again the sacred balance.
So you've heard Dr. Gardner talk about you've heard Dr. Gardner talk about, I'm really not doing well with my PowerPoints today. You've heard Dr. Gardner talking about giving back, and I just want to, am I out of it again, Parker?
You're still sharing your screen. It's just a white slide.
Shouldn't be. So I'm trying to move it on and it's not letting me move it on. So, okay. So, I don't know why.
There, you're showing your screen right now.
So when I went up to when I did the 3 hours with White Earth Indian Reservation, after that training, I got this poem sent to me and it was signed by Carson Gardner. And I thought, who is Carson Gardner? This is such a beautiful poem. I called my boss and sent it to him and Red Cross. And I'm like, look at this, it's just awesome. But I want to know who it is. So I responded and said, so may I ask who you are? And he goes, I was in the session. I'm the physician. I'm Dr. Gardner. And so I have used that poem in my Christmas greetings. I made up something for Dr. Gardner and myself that I have displayed in my home with the poem that he did. It's a beautiful poem about life experiences and the ups and downs of life experiences and healing and trauma. And then to top that off, as we've had conversations over these last many weeks about doing this training, because it was like, oh, I said to my boss, if there would be any way I could train with somebody like Dr. Gardner, it'd just be incredible. Well, so I got brave enough to ask, and he said yes, but he's not going to be able to train with me all the time. So he's given me tools and gifts to be able to use as I continue on with this training that I'm doing with Native communities and those that serve Native communities and Alaskan Natives. And so another gift is that he came up with what he calls the Red Circle Psychological First Aid. So Dr. Gardner, I'm going to suggest for time's sake that you do the poem and then do the psychological first aid, because I love it when he reads it, when he speaks it, because he has, in my opinion, such a powerful voice with his storytelling. And then let's open it up for questions. Does that make sense, Dr. Gardner?
Yes, that's fine.
All right. So again, go ahead, Dr. Gardner.
This is the poem I wrote after being a participant in Rose's psychological first aid session for our tribal health department employees. It's called I Choose to Dance On. I am alive. I feel pain, but I am much more than that pain. My pain is not your pain, and yours is not mine. I give my pain its place in my circle dance. My pain is like the wind. My pain is like the water. My pain is like the fire. My pain is like the stone. The wind grants me breath. The water grants me cleansing. The fire grants me light. The stone grants me a path. I do not control the air, but I breathe. I do not control the water, but I wash clean. I do not control the fire, but I see. I do not control the stone, but I dance. Moving through my pain to discover joy is a way to be alive. I move through my pain, discovering the joy and meaning, purpose, and service. My pain does not define me or limit me, but it does acknowledge pathways toward my joy. In thanks and with mercy, I choose to dance on.
Beautiful. I just love it. I will use it forever because it acknowledges we all have pain. We all have choices. We all have some control. You heard Dr. Gardner share that given all the injuries that he had in that motorcycle accident that he described to us, look at what he chose to do. He had control over very little because he described everything he didn't have control over, but he had control over saying McGuish, thank you, to everybody, to every opportunity he could. And that was healing for him. So sometimes when we think we don't have control, it's incredible how if we stop and think, we can think about where we do have control. In 2019, the same year that Dr. Gardner had his accident, I was outside and it was not any big predicted storm, but in the process of a Saturday morning, wind came up. My largest tree in my backyard fell, and I was inches away from being impaled by the largest tree I had. And as I stepped inside and realized that I made it inside before it fell right behind me, I said, well, out loud, nobody else is here. I said, well, I guess you got more work for me to do because I made it. Because had I not taken those couple of steps ahead of that huge tree falling on my house and trashing a bunch of stuff, I wouldn't be alive. I wouldn't be doing this today. So wake up every morning grateful. I'm not a big fan of when the wind comes up because it's a trigger for me when there's extreme winds, having had a huge tree fall on my house and do a bunch of damage, but I'm alive and I'm grateful to be alive. Dr. Gardner, psych first aid, red circle, psych first aid.
Okay, this is something that I've only recently written down. I've been using these teachings for quite a while, but this is the first time that I wrote it down to share all at once. So I call it red circle first aid, which is my sense of humor. Since Rose is talking about Red Cross first aid, I'm talking about red circle first aid. So you get the cross and the circle. Okay, start each day with thanks, end each day with thanks, and in between, walk the talk of your thankfulness. Accept a higher power, even if you think you don't need one, because you will live and die in debt to that something greater than yourself. Choose merciful teachings to guide your thoughts and actions and decisions, because your value will be measured by how much you can give, not how much you can get. If you make the effort, you can find all the ethical wisdom you need in your native nation's language, culture, spiritual stories, and ceremonies. The healing medicine of ancient teachings is coded into your DNA, waiting to be awakened. Try to be humble, generous, respectful, and helpful, especially to elders, children, women, the vulnerable, and to all the rest of creation that sacrifices so human beings can survive. Share laughter often in kind and gentle ways. Take care of yourself with healthy food, drink, friends, and pastimes. Plug your ears and walk away from the Wendigo song of shadow cravings. When you can't do that by yourself, accept responsible help. Work without complaining, rest without guilt, play enthusiastically, speak and pray honestly, defend against injustice. Forgive easily, judge no one, bully no one, wound no one. Spend quiet time outdoors frequently by moving water, trees, and open sky if possible. Smudge to help return healing, spiritual messages and memories into the center of your thoughts and emotions. Discover and share stories of forgiveness and reconciliation. Aho, miigwech, miu.
So again, you just got to know that this is a man who's given his time to help me with these trainings. He's far more than just a man, but he has provided me with resources I'm going to be able to use with ongoing training. He's been willing to spend a bunch of time in developing this training. So I can't begin to tell you how grateful I am for Dr. Gardner, but I'm also so grateful for the center and all that they've given us in terms of time and support for being able to do this presentation. I see that we have about 20 minutes. I think there's some questions, and I want to make sure that you either so they'll be able to unmute themselves and ask questions of Dr. Gardner. They don't just have to put it in chat.
Yeah, I don't see why not. If anybody wants to ask questions, I do have one to start. The poems that you were reading, Dr. Gardner, are those allowable for participants to utilize for their own purposes that you were reciting? Because it was inspirational to a couple folks in the chat, and I wanted to be able to tell them.
Yes, you have copies, Megan. You have a copy of my PowerPoint, and both the poem and the red circle first aid are in my PowerPoint, so you can certainly share them with anybody who would like to have them.
Thank you very much. So Mary, that answers your question. Anyone else wants to open up, just go ahead and unmute yourself and feel free to ask questions.
Okay, can you hear me? This is Mary.
Yes.
Hi, I'm going to be brave and speak up.
Good for you.
I thank you for all the wonderful reminders of the importance of story and the importance of circle in our healings. I've worked with Native American communities and in Alaska off and on the past 25 years. My specialty was adolescent substance abuse. And I'm now in Oregon, and I was working for a residential treatment center here. There's a long-term treatment center for adolescents, one of the very few in our state. And I was able to utilize a lot of these teachings because we did actually have kids coming in from various tribes into our program, and they really had no connection at all with their culture. And I found that, you know, using the 7 grandfathers' teachings, the teachings of the medicine wheel, we had talking circles, were all very powerful tools for them. Unfortunately, last spring, the program closed its doors after 32 years. And I've kind of been lost ever since then. They moved me to an adult women's program. And I only work part-time, I'm semi-retired. And it just wasn't the same. And right around that same time frame, close to a year ago, I lost my spirit animal, my horse of 20 years, passed away suddenly. And by midsummer, I realized that these women I was working with, I was taking home their trauma. And I finally had to take a break from work. And I've been off work about 6 months now. And I'm grateful that I have found a wonderful therapist. But one of the struggles here is there's like a 1-year wait list to see a psychiatrist or psychologist here. And even the wait lists for therapists are usually like 6 months long. And I'm just curious to know, I mean, I don't know if this is specifically due to COVID or if it's, you know, due to the reduction in healthcare workers, you know, across the country. I'm curious to know if you all are seeing or hearing that as well. I'm working every day to try to have an attitude of gratitude and to find my joy and actually deal with some multi-generational trauma I didn't realize I had until all this hit. But anyways, I won't get into all of my story, but I'm just curious if you've seen this happen in other areas where COVID has either resulted in the shutting down of treatment programs or the reduction in the number of professionals able to work with those of us with mental health issues.
I only know our area here on White Earth lands, but yes, we've had some substantial challenges. We've continued to provide services. We've had illnesses of some of our behavioral health workers. I'm not aware of any deaths, but we've had substantial illnesses. One of our ambulance personnel also, who was a very vigorous middle-aged person, spent couple of weeks in an ICU, unfortunately survived, but you know, really was powerfully affected by the complications of COVID. So, and we've lost a number of spiritual leaders. We were able to provide some telehealth behavioral health counseling, but of course that isn't very satisfying for either the client or the counselor. It's hard to do behavioral health support by telehealth, but it's better than no support. So our behavioral health programs are all opened up now face-to-face. We have adult and adolescent treatment centers. We don't have per se a psychological residential facility, and we don't have a detoxification facility of any kind, but we do have adult and adolescent residential chemical dependency treatment centers, and they have been fairly resilient. I will share with you that our overdose rate went up over 400% during COVID, which is symptomatic of what else is happening all around the US and all around the world. People who are desperate, back against the wall and no face-to-face nurture and support and help, have turned to drugs, and it's so dangerous now with fentanyl analogs. So we had multiple deaths this year that were a terrible trauma to our community, not COVID deaths, but overdose deaths, in addition to the COVID deaths we've had. So yes, we've had a tough time. Fortunately, our behavioral health divisional director, who's a wonderful Native Nation individual, worked his way up from being a volunteer harm reduction worker all the way to his current position of director of behavioral health division. And his attitude is, it's got to work at street level to help people, or it's not really helpful. So we've been blessed by that, and we have built up our behavioral health response team considerably. So we are able to do a lot better than 6 months, but we're struggling to provide immediate walk-in services for people who are in crisis. It's hard to do that, but we're rebuilding as the COVID case counts drop and as it's becoming safer. So I encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. Look at your strengths, accept the help that you have connected with. And at some point along the way, I'm sure that you'll be called to help others again, whether it's professionally or just personally. So that'll be a dimension I think that you're reaching out to again share. So thank you for your courage and determination. And yes, we are having very similar problems. And together we will overcome those problems, and we will return to providing rapid and complete behavioral health response services. So Miigwech, thank you.
Thank you.
Megan, do you want to speak to this from a national perspective that you know?
Well, I just know that, just for an example, I just called to seek some therapy services for someone yesterday, and within my own university, for the youth to get in, the services are backed up 6 to 12 months.
Yeah.
And I mean, when you need the help now, how do you tell someone, no, I'm sorry? So I'm trying to figure out other options for them, because there's got to be a way to get them services, and whether it's through an employee assistance program or some other way, I am determined to help, because like this whole meeting has been about giving, and I would always rather give than receive. It makes me uncomfortable to receive. So I like try and give back whenever I can. And so I will, be determined to help this person, and just know that it's a nationwide crisis right now, and especially with the youth. And it's been like this, honestly, in my line of work for 20 years in our area, and our services in mental health are at the bottom because the government cuts programs, and unfortunately, families who need the counseling because they're on probation or they need psych evals, we can't get the services that they need because there is a lack of staff and resources. So it's nationwide. I hope it gets better because there's tons of initiatives right now.
Yeah.
For the process for mental health and behavioral health funds to be dispersed so we can resolve this issue, because it's major right now. And what Dr. Gardner was saying about the suicide rate is very high. It's very scary. And so yes, you're not alone, and you keep doing all the good work you're doing. But I think taking time off for yourself and not carrying other people's trauma is very, very important. And you're doing the right thing to take this time. So thanks, Mary.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you. Let's see if there's other questions for Dr. Gardner or Megan or myself. Megan, you're muted.
Sorry, I was thinking that the resource that you shared with all of us that, and Parker and I were talking about if it would be possible to, put that on our website, because you had listed so many great resources
Sure.
that not everyone got to go through. And May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So perfect timing. And I would love to feature it if you don't mind.
Yeah, no
And
problem.
then anyone can click on that. And
Yeah, no, everything that is in my PowerPoint is shareable, so
Awesome.
none of it's protected. So
thank you. Well, I
just like
appreciate
with
that.
Dr. Gardner.
Well, thank you guys. It's nice to share.
Yep.
It's
Everything in my PowerPoint is shareable too. I don't have the wonderful resource list that Rose has, but if there is anything that will be useful to people, they're welcome to have it.
okay. Thank you very much. And thanks for sharing your personal story. Both of you. That takes a lot to announce that to people you're meeting virtually across the country. So I appreciate the stories. We all have something similar, I think, that makes us be thankful for every day. So just thank you. Anybody else have any questions? We got about 10 minutes left, or we can end a little early. It's up to you guys.
I guess I have something that I didn't get in, and Rose could teach it better than I can, but
I don't believe that, Dr. Gardner, but go for it.
I'll see if I can find it. It was just some very brief comments along the same lines as Rose talked about. What can you do? What can you do? I read an article in which an individual gave a very brief but very, very clear summary of 5 steps in your own personal healing when you're suffering COVID stress. The steps are safe space, safe time, safe strength, safe sharing, and safe hope. And safe space is when you're really hurting and wounded by the stress of COVID or whatever is wounding you in life, you may need to take a break, and that's the right thing to do. And you may need to accept the help of a colleague or friend or family member to help you take that break and not feel like you have to keep working wounded. The second thing is safe time. You may need to take longer than you think for that restoration, return of balance. So take the time you need to regain your emotional, mental, spiritual balance in that safe space. The third thing is safe strength, and that means remember how you have used your own inner resources, just like Rose talked about, to win battles over stress and emotional and mental wounds in the past. Remember those strengths, get them back out again, brush the dust off, and use those strengths you have, just as you used them in the past. Safe sharing means, perhaps if you've studied generational trauma, you know the saying, the absolute wrong question to ask someone who's suffering intergenerational trauma is, what's wrong with you? The right question to ask is, what happened to you? And you will need to talk to someone you trust, whether it's a professional like Rose, or whether it's a family member, a spiritual counselor, a colleague, someone you trust, and tell them what happened to you. Just opening up and talking about it can be very, very healing. And then finally, safe hope. You heard that mentioned by the Medewan Ikwe, who spoke to us. The woman who was a spiritual leader and elder spoke to us. She said, don't look backward, there's darkness there, look forward. And yes, of course, talking about what happened to you requires a look backward, but it's important for us all to focus forward on the hope that we share together for getting back into balance and sharing healing with each other. So focusing forward is important after talking about the wounds of the past. And then I have another just very short thing you'll laugh at, but it says the important steps of accepting self-healing and resilience in very short words. I think I have 10 things, and here they are. Talk it out, walk it out, wash it out, feed it out, laugh it out, sleep it out, play it out, sweat it out, write it out, think it out. Well, holy man, Doc, can you slow down? Sure. Talk it out. We just talked about that. You need to Tell someone what happened to you. Walk it out means physical exercise is a wonderful healing medicine, as simple as it sounds. It will help to bring you back into balance. Wash it out is drink plenty of water. Oh, that's too simple. It can't really work. Well, it does. We're all 70% water. Drinking more water every day will actually be giving yourself a healing medicine. You heard that an Anishinaabe woman leader, spiritual leader, say we have to honor the water. And one way is to accept the fact we're made of water and we need water. Feed it out just means eat a little healthier, and native nation diets or some of the traditional diets are some of the healthiest. You guys all know fry bread is not a traditional food. It's what we had to do to survive when all we had was flour and lard. But traditional, truly traditional native nation diets are wonderful, healthy diets. So look into that a little bit. You gathered that I have a sense of humor, and that sense of humor has helped me get through some tough times. So native nation humor at its best is kind and gentle and self-effacing. It's not weaponized and wounding. So laugh more, laugh with each other, because if we can't laugh together, how can we cry together? Sleep it out. Well, not too much or too little, but plan your day so that you perhaps take a piece of paper and write down 2 or 3 lines about what you're worried about first thing in the morning, and then think about them a little bit. And then when it comes evening, remind yourself, you know, I worried about those things this morning and I'll do it again tomorrow morning, but I'm not going to spend my time staring at the ceiling when I should be sleeping. There's a lot more to be said about healthy sleep, but that's the short version. Play it out. Like Rose said, we need healthful, positive, restorative hobbies and pastimes. Sweat it out is just my reference to Sweat Lodge. There are many other ceremonies, but take the time to explore reconnection with traditional ceremony, whatever it may be, whatever your native nation offers for healing ceremony. Explore that and see if you can connect to it. Write it out. We talked about that. You don't have to write a novel or even a poem. You can write 1 paragraph every day. What's on your mind? What happened? Where are you at in your healing and balancing process? And then finally, think it out. You heard several recommendations about spending time out of doors quietly by running water, by trees, in the open air. We're all too busy doing stuff, social media, telephones, cell phones, videos, even wonderful computers. Take some time to leave that stuff in the house, go outside and sit quietly. I've heard traditional healers say, if you sit quietly and wait, the healing spirits will give you teachings that will help you to get back in balance. So those are the things I didn't get a chance to say that I would add here, Rose. So miigwech for the opportunity. Megan, Parker, miigwech, what a wonderful team you guys are. Glad to work with you.
So Megan, do you want to mention the evals? I want to mention it in that because I am a Red Cross volunteer and volunteer instructor, and because Red Cross wants to get feedback about whether or not I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and people's feedback, because it gets used for the importance of the work that we're doing. I really do appreciate if you're willing to fill out the eval, and then Megan provides that information. And Megan, I would guess your funders, very much so, I'll let you speak to that, also want feedback about what you're offering.
Yeah, so I put the link in the chat, and it'll also come to you guys when you get the handouts and the recording link and everything in the email. So because you registered for this event today, everyone will receive that. It does take a day or two to process the recordings, and this one is a little special because we're going to put in some downtime per se. When we had the drum story, we're going to add in some other videos to replace that. So it's going to be a process. I'm so thankful to Parker for doing this for us. He will be the one who, you know, gets that all together, and a huge shout out for being on today. Thank you. You're not just the IT guy, you're a special guy who has helped all 4 of us, and we really appreciate it. I'm glad that if you guys do take that chance to do the post-survey link, that's great. Our funders do ask for it, of course, to keep these trainings free you know, and so we can keep doing the good work that we're doing in our center and meeting nice people like Rose and Carson. I mean, it's just amazing the way we've connected, and you've reached out to us, and I just feel like I've known you forever now. So,
Yes, I agree.
yeah, so this
Well,
has been a
thank
great
you
group.
all. Thank you all very, very much. And one more piece of good news, one more piece of gratitude. I know some of you already heard this, but I head out on the road tomorrow for about a 6-hour drive up to Cass Lake, Minnesota to do a training with Red Cross up there. And then on Sunday morning, I get to head over to have lunch with Dr. Gardner and his wife. So I get to meet him in person on Sunday for lunch, which I am just thrilled to be able to get to do. And how lucky am I that Cass County wanted me to come up and assist them with the psych first aid training. And then I looked and figured out that Dr. Gardner wasn't that far away, that I could ask him if I could meet him in person. So
Well, you guys, I'll reuse the joke I used a month ago. Rose is going to find out that I'm really 4 feet 3 inches tall.
Well, there's nothing we can do about that.
I'm okay with